Okay. So hi guys. So we're just gonna be doing a presentation on stress and kind of like what Ellie's saying. It's just like super important, especially as high schoolers. Like as someone who's like gone through the whole 4 years and the college process and everything. Like it's super stressful. So like important to know about like what stress can do to you and how to like deal with it. So we're gonna be like talking about mainly different causes of stress. So like different things that can lead you to be stressed out, and then different stress related disorders, which includes not only things that we categorize as stress disorders, but disorders that stress can increase the risk of developing, and just different ways to cope with stress. And at the end, we're gonna have a Kahoot, and the winner does get free boba. So be sure to pay attention.
Okay, to start off, here's a quote that we found, and it says, "Stress is the trash of modern life. We all generate it, but if you don't dispose of it properly, it will pile up and overtake your life." So I found it to be a really insightful analogy, like especially comparing trash to stress, because we all generate this stress, but it depends on how we organize it and get rid of it that impacts our mental health.
Okay, so then first I'm gonna talk about the causes of stress and the different types of stress as well as some of like the symptoms.
So before we do that, we're just gonna play a quick video on like the biology behind stress, like which will tie into what Brian's gonna say.
Neuroscience, where I explain neuroscience topics in 2 minutes or less. In this installment, I will discuss the HPA axis. The adrenal, or HPA, axis is best known for its role in our body's reaction to stress. The HPA axis includes a group of hormone-secreting glands from the nervous and endocrine systems, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands. The hypothalamus is a small neuroendocrine structure situated just above the brainstem that controls the release of hormones from the pituitary gland, a hormone-secreting gland that sits just below the hypothalamus. The pituitary gland can release hormones into the bloodstream to reach a variety of targets. In the case of the HPA axis, hormones released from the pituitary gland travel down to the kidneys and influence the secretion of hormones from endocrine glands called the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys. The primary function of the HPA axis is to regulate the stress response. When we experience something stressful, the hypothalamus releases a hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH. CRH signals the pituitary gland to secrete a hormone called adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, into the bloodstream. ACTH travels down to the adrenal glands, where it prompts the release of a hormone called cortisol from the cortex, or outer layer of the adrenal glands. The release of cortisol causes a number of changes that help the body to deal with stress. For example, it helps to mobilize energy like glucose, so the body has enough energy to cope with a prolonged stressor. When cortisol levels in the blood get high, this is sensed by receptors in areas of the brain like the hypothalamus.
Okay. So stress is our natural response to any perceived threat that yeah, sorry. So stress is our natural response to any perceived threat that you can't do anything about. So we inherited this from our ancestors who like had to survive against natural predators and other various things. So when the brain perceives a threat, so and determines that whether it's stressful, the hypothalamus, like as stated in the video, activates the pituitary gland, and that activates the adrenal medulla, which creates hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, which increase your heartbeat, breathing, and prepare your body for the flight or fight response. And so this stress can be divided into three phases: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So alarm is when you first perceive the threat and your body is preparing itself for the fight or flight response. Resistance is when your body is fully prepared, and it's when you have to choose to either confront what you find threatening or run away. And then exhaustion is after you have evaded the threat and your body returns to normal. So then your you have two pathways which work in conjunction uh, during um, to during stress. So the first one is the sympathetic nervous system. Um, this is what the hypothalamus activates, and um, reg, it's what increases your heartbeat, breathing, etc., um, causing these symptoms. While the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for redirecting energy to your muscles from like your digestive tract, and is also responsible for returning your body to normal after um, you've evaded whatever you find threatening. So, while the stress we inherited from our ancestors was a survival tool, nowadays, the stress we feel is more long term as um, things such as homework or like a job. Like these are things that um, we we find like stress us, but we can't run away from them like we could with like say a predator because like they're gonna stay there. So this leads to prolonged stress, which is also called chronic stress, and this leads to like the disorders and the negative aspects of stress that we're familiar with, like exhaustion, being unable to concentrate, insomnia, or irritability. Um, al- However, stress can also be a good thing. It increases your immune system uh, for a short period of time when you're stressed. It also, while chronic stress is harmful to child development, um, a 2006 John Hopkins study found that babies born to women who experienced mild to moderate stress had more advanced early development skills by the age of 2 than babies born to unstressed mothers. And as well as being stressed moderately can help with your motivation, and it can increase brain power as um, the stress hormones also help in the production of brain chemicals called neurotrophins, which strengthen the connection between neurons. And this leads to the concentration boost and productivity that you get when you are over a short period of time. And so um, this quote, so there's this toxicologist named Paracelsus who said the dose makes the poison. So I find this quote very relevant to stress because stress, when managed correctly and in the correct doses, can be a very effective tool in reaching your goals. However, if it's like unregulated, unchecked, and like it's uncontrolled, then it can very easily poison your life.
So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about like stress-related disorders. Interestingly, like not all stress disorders are necessarily the only things that stress can affect. Stress can actually increase your risk of developing multiple other disorders. For example, heart disease is interestingly has been shown that chronic stress can increase your risk of developing heart disease. There aren't exact studies as to how this is, but one possible thing is that when you're stressed out, your heart beats a lot faster. Like, I'm sure you guys, if you guys have like Fitbits or smartwatches, like, for example, for me, like my heart rate went from 62 the week before my first semester junior year finals to 72 the next week, like within 3 days. So it just shows like how much of an effect stress can have on your heart rate. And that can honestly like result in you having a buildup of too much blood, and that can cause heart disease because you could have blockage. And stress can also interestingly increase the risk of developing asthma. Well, that has been shown. Something that kind of relates to what Brian was saying is that if your mom has chronic stress during pregnancy, it significantly increases your chance of developing asthma when you grow up. So, in other words, if a parent has stress while they're pregnant with their child, that child is much more likely to develop asthma. And then some other things that it can increase the risk of is like obesity, which is relatively self-explanatory. But when you have chronic stress, you release more cortisoids into the body, I believe, and that eating like broccoli, right? Like we're stress eating like typically junk food, and that's actually shown to have a huge effect on diabetes. Because if you're often stressed out, then you're often like stress eating like junk food you shouldn't be eating, and that actually can lead to diabetes, like much higher rate. Stress also just causes headaches. It's just they just do cause headaches. And another interesting thing is depression and anxiety, because when you're stressed out, you feel less in control of your life and more like things aren't going to work out, and that leads to anxiety. And once you believe that things won't work out for you, you become depressed because, kind of like I said, you feel like you don't have control over your own life. And it's kind of like a never ending vicious cycle. But really interestingly, it's also been shown to increase your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and gastrointestinal diseases, particularly ulcers for gastrointestinal diseases. And ulcers are, I'm sure you know, but like those like things that kind of like in your stomach when you don't eat well or at the right times in the day, you can like develop it over time, and it's just like it's like kind of like almost a hole in your stomach. But stress doesn't directly create ulcers. What it does is if you have an ulcer already, it makes those ulcers grow a lot faster. Similarly, in Alzheimer's disease, as I'm sure you know, Alzheimer's disease is often caused by amyloid beta plaques in the brain and brain lesions. And what stress does is it doesn't cause brain lesions, but if you already have those Alzheimer's brain lesions, it can like make the disease progress a lot faster. Like it can make those lesions grow a lot faster. The other thing that like it like increases your like death, like you die earlier. It can like also accelerate aging by up to 20 years, but typically like 9 to 17 years if you are stressed, because it like alters your DNA and makes you more likely to die earlier. And if you missed the previous slide, just like in terms of the Kahoot, just remember like what stress does is it doesn't increase your risk of developing ulcers or brain lesions, which is what cause Alzheimer's disease along with amyloid beta plaques. But if you have ulcers or lesions, it makes those grow a lot faster. And especially in Alzheimer's disease, it's been shown that if you can maintain your stress, you can slow down the progression of the disease a lot. Okay. And then now like the actual stress disorder. So primarily there's acute stress disorder. And acute stress disorder is pretty similar to PTSD, except for if the duration of your post-traumatic event, like this associative whatever, like identity or whatever, like if that lasts for typically under a month, but maximum 1 to 3 months, usually 0 days to 31 days, are also often they show like anxiety, aggression, depression, and like irritability, insomnia, or like extreme lethargy. And that's just but that only lasts for about a month after the trauma, and then it goes away. The most common way to deal with that is cognitive behavior therapy. And
Wait.
then PTSD.
Simmy,
Yeah.
can you repeat like the middle section of that last slide? Just because you cut out for a bit.
Oh my gosh, I keep cutting
Yeah.
out. Okay,
Wait,
wait, yeah.
Simi, do you think you want to turn on hotspot? I don't know if it will help, but
Okay, I can try.
Yeah.
On here. Wait, am I sharing video?
no, you're not.
Oh, that's so weird. Hopefully it won't cut out again. I'm almost done, and then it'll be Victoria. I'm basically done. Okay, yeah. And so basically, like I was just saying that like it's very similar to PTSD more or less, but it only lasts like under a month after the traumatic event. That's like more or less the only difference. And then everyone kind of heard of PTSD, but it's kind of like when people suffer from a traumatic event and they like feel the after effects. Common symptoms include like irritation, aggression, and lethargy or insomnia, and a lot of other things.
So I'll be talking about treatments and ways to cope with stress, and some of these focus on changing mindset. Like instead of viewing stress as an insurmountable challenge, instead view it as something that you can control, and through that you can like manage your emotions while maintaining a healthy lifestyle and concentrate more easily. Yep, so before I go into the actual treatments, I wanted to share with you guys a case study that I came across, and it claims that 40 to 70% of people experience some sort of trauma through their lifetime, with death being the most common form and sexual assault leading to the highest rates of PTSD. The study also found that gender and ethnicity played a role in one's response to stress, as it quoted that Black men appeared to have be the most vulnerable to the effects of events, but young people showed the highest rates of PTSD. And the stat might be a bit outdated because the source was published in 1992. And nowadays, as Brian mentioned, like more people are experiencing stress than ever before. But the point remains just as clear, if not even more, that like an extensive portion of the population will encounter some sort of stimuli or stress. So it's pertinent to promote and emphasize these ways to alleviate. So now I have treatments, and these are typically medically related. Sometimes they involve professionals, and they tend to cure or reduce symptoms of some of the disorders that Simmy mentioned. Okay, I'll just move on. I'm not sure if the slide has changed.
Yeah.
So we have 4 types of treatments. There's talking treatment, medication, ecotherapy, and alternative or complementary therapies. Yeah, so the first type is talking, and this is one of the talking therapies is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is also known as CBT, and it focuses on changing the negative thinking cycle, which ends up reorienting your behavior and helps treat anxiety, depression, bipolar, OCD, or schizophrenia. So a wide range of mental health disorders. Second, we have medication. This is prescribed to you by your doctor. These include sleeping pills, which helps build a sleeping pattern and treat insomnia, which is a common effect of stress. There's also antidepressants, which works with depression or anxiety, and also the other physical symptoms of stress and their corresponding medication are part of the medication category of treatments. So treatments continued. There's ecotherapy, which is basically nature associated with therapy. And this involves spending time outside, connecting outdoors while connecting with nature, and it leads to improved self-esteem. And some ways you can do this is through gardening or participating in conservation projects, just enough to encourage interacting with nature and spending more time outdoors. There's also other therapies. This is like kind of an umbrella term, but there's acupuncture, Chinese medicine of inserting thin needles to release endorphins. It also affects serotonin levels. Also, there's aromatherapy, massage, so on and so forth. Next slide. Okay, so we have coping mechanisms, which are methods that you can use and practice on your own to improve your mental health and strengthen your well-being. It also focuses on your behavior in maintaining a positive attitude. So first, there's 5 types of coping. These are strategies that work to mitigate stress and its impacts. So the first is appraisal, in which you change or modify your mindset through things such as practices such as denial, distraction, even like humorizing the situation, so that the stress and its effects and like the bringing up of the stressful topic ends up being less mentally impactful. There's also adaptive, in which you view stress as a problem, a challenge that you need to overcome. And through doing this, you will learn like skills or information that you need to overcome this stressful situation. It works particularly well if you have control of the situation, if it's something that you know you can overcome and stuff. And third, we have emotional, focused, and this is good for situations that you do not have control over. So instead, you work on self-control, like controlling basically your emotions. Through this, you can release pent-up emotions, you can manage them, perhaps distract them, and also another way of practicing is through mindfulness. Next, we have social, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically, for example, engaging in social interactions through talking to a therapist or friends or families. Basically, these social interactions are something that can support a healthy lifestyle and a positive mindset. Last but not least, we have reactive and proactive. So this means being aware of the situation and taking proactive steps by anticipating it in the future. And it can decrease anxiety levels, especially if you're like a kind of person who is comforted when you feel control of the future. Okay, So the first type of coping mechanism, well, the first practice that you can do is exercise, and it increases endorphin production, which is basically desensitizing your tolerance to pain. Exercise mimics the effects of stress, but in this case, you're actually relieving them in a healthy manner instead of like, I don't know, stress eating or something. That's something that Simmy mentioned. Exercising also improves mood because it increases your self-confidence and it lowers levels of depression and anxiety. It is also, it can treat insomnia, which is commonly connected to stress, and it helps you treat sleep better. And from a neurological, psychological perspective, it balances, exercising balances the nervous system and increases blood circulation, which gets rid of these stress hormones, and it increases hippocampus size, which is a which leads to memory retention improvement and ultimately better concentration. So now I'll be talking about mindfulness, which is a type of meditation where you become aware of what is happening at the moment from an objective view. So you're not making any judgments and you channel your concentration towards it. It involves breathing exercises and guided imagery to help reduce stress and induce relaxation. And mindfulness is particularly useful because it helps you calm down and improve your focus and sleep. It also helps you reconnect with yourself, especially after like a hectic day. And as the visual shows, whenever you're struggling, remember the times you have succeeded and survived and know that you can make it through. So here are some tips on ways to practice mindfulness. So first, find a quiet room to give yourself space from the outer world. This lets you separate yourself and really just create that inner space for you to channel your thoughts. Pay attention to the present. This kind of a helpful way to do that is the last point, using breathing as an anchor. So this helps you improve your focus on what is happening at the moment. When you're trying to become aware of your surroundings, try to avoid judgment and train your mind not to wander. And finally, another way to deal with effects of stress is journaling, where you write everything down on a piece of paper. Journaling is a great habit because it's therapeutic, it relieves anxiety and helps you analyze everything that's going on in your life. And I think personally, you grow as a person once you write everything that's in your head down on paper. And journaling doesn't need to be fancy. And technically, it doesn't have to be on physical paper. Just like know that this is like a private moment to keep your thoughts to yourself and just vent out everything onto a document or a piece of paper. Journaling is a great stress manager because, and I'm quoting, whenever you feel frazzled, overwhelmed, or just anxious, there's nothing like pouring your frustrations out onto a journal for some catharsis. This is from Vanilla Papers. It's useful if you have a lot of things that are going on in your mind. You can talk about like your emotions, what makes you feel anxious, happy, scared, what are your challenges. Personally, I like to write about what makes me grateful because it helps me focus on the positive aspects of life and also like invigorates me in terms of mentality. So I highly suggest trying out if you don't already do it.